The mallet bites my palm before I know I'm holding it. Wood worn smooth, a callus ridge where the thumb sits, a grip the hand makes without asking me. This hand is not mine. The knuckles are wrong, the wrist too thin, the nails packed with limestone dust I never breathed. Someone is shouting a name, not my name. "Corin, are you deaf, boy?" Garin. The old mason stands over me, beard gone white with stone grit, his own mallet hanging slack from one fist. We're up on the second terrace. Morning. The cliff falls away past his shoulder to a green sea I have never seen and somehow remember hating. I look at the hands again. 17, maybe. The body knows the work. It set the chisel back in its groove while my mind was still going under. "You went white as a drowned man," Garin says. "Sit before you pitch off my scaffold." I sit. The plank is real. The grit is real. The ache in this young back is real, and real is the thing I can't stand. Because I came back to a morning I already survived once and paid for in full. I get my feet under me. I look out, and the city stacks itself in front of me exactly the way grief drew it. 3 shelves of pale stone over a fault that breathes in its sleep. Caldros. I know this railing. I know that cracked bell in the gate tower. Everything sits where it should. That's the wrong part. The wall beside Garin has a pulse to it. Faint, under the surface, a slow red weather I feel behind my eyes more than see. Stone tiring. Stone keeping its own count, the way all loaded stone does for me now. The whole terrace hums with it. Quiet. Alive. Across the gap, the Temple of St. Tever says nothing at all. I stare. Squat dome, the great doors thrown open, pilgrims climbing the steps with candles guttering in the wind. A building full of breath, and to my sight it sits there dark and dumb. No pulse, no weather, no count, like a chest that has forgotten how to rise. That's impossible. The heaviest stone in this city should be screaming straight into my teeth. "Corin!" Garin's hand closes on my shoulder, rough, warm. "What are you gawping at?" I don't answer him. I'm watching the seam above the temple doors where the column's shoulder shoves up into the arch, and I'm waiting for it to keep doing nothing. It does not keep doing nothing. It catches. One thread of crimson crawls up the joint, thin as a hair, then swelling fat where the weight leans hardest. Behind my eyes, a pressure begins to tick down, slow, patient, a number I can almost taste. The temple wasn't silent. It was holding its breath. My mouth has gone dry. Garin is still talking, asking if I've eaten, telling me to fetch the level. I hear none of it. I dug her out from under that arch with hands that looked just like these. The crimson deepens. The count keeps falling. And I understand, cold all the way down, that the silence I mistook for a dead building was the sound of something deciding exactly when to let go. The wind shifts off the sea and gutters every candle on the temple steps at once. Below me, a pilgrim cups her flame, swears, and climbs on. Garin still gripping my shoulder. The thread above the doors hasn't stopped. It's spreading. I follow it up. My eyes drag from the arch to the shaft of the column itself and the stone lights. Not the doors, the whole thing. The great trunk of St. Tev, 3 men thick, rising out of the temple roof to hold the dome. And now it's veined head to foot in crimson. 100 hairlines waking at once. Each one breathes. Each one carries its own small falling number. And I feel them all ticking against the back of my eyes like sleet on a window. "Boy," Garin shakes me. "You're shaking my scaffold." I am. My knees won't hold the plank still. "That column!" My voice comes out someone else's, thin, young. "How old is it?" He squints across the gap, sees nothing, because there's nothing there for him to see. Pale stone, a dome, sun on a wind-scoured shoulder of rock that has stood since his grandfather hauled it up. "Older than the city charter," he says. "Staines people seeded it last spring." Why? Seeded it. They recut the base last spring and called it sound. I know exactly how that base looks under load. I knelt in its rubble once and could not make my hands work. The seams pulse brighter where the dome's weight leans hardest. I read them the way you read a face you've buried. The shoulder above the doors is the worst, fat and furious, the rest fanning out from it like cracks in river ice the moment before it gives. The whole column is one held breath, and it's letting it out, slowly, on a count. I make myself find the count. It's there behind everything else, the deep one, the one all the little numbers answer to. Steady, patient, falling. 71 hours. The plank tilts under me and I grab the railing, this railing, the one I'd know blind, the one I gripped while they carried small shapes down past it under sailcloth. 71 hours from this wind, this candle, this old man's hand on my arm. Corin? Garen's voice drops. The mockery's gone out of it. Lad, you've gone gray again. I can't look away from the column. I count, and the number does not care that I'm counting. Last time it took her on a market morning, I had 3 days to find it, and I spent them sleeping, eating, laughing at something I can't even remember. I have them again. Every one, and she's down there right now, alive, on a terrace I watched come down. I'm off Garen's plank before he can grab a fistful of my shirt. Down the ladder, boots skidding on grit, because I have to know the sight is mine and not grief wearing my eyes. The cutter's yard sits one terrace down, a long shelf of dressed stone, dust hanging gold in the morning light, and over it, a cornice juts from the old granary wall, a slab the length of a cart. It's burning. Not like the column. Short, a mean little count, close to the end, throbbing red along one bedding joint where the slab has pulled off its seat. Behind my eyes, the number drops fast. Minutes, not hours. Under it, 6 men haul a block on rollers. A guild overseer stands over them, brass whistle on a cord, tally stick tapping his thigh, the gray sash. He blows the whistle. Move it! Think the guild pays you to admire the view? I read the joint again. I count clean, no wanting, no fear leaning on the number. The thread fattens. Soon, very soon. I do the math the way I once did it over rubble, and my mouth is moving before I decide to let it. Get them out from under that cornice! I'm already walking at him. Now! He turns. Takes in the dust, the boy's frame, the apprentice gray, and laughs through his teeth. Garen's runt. Crawl back up your scaffold. That slab's coming down, I point. The joint's gone. He doesn't look up. Stone sound. Stain's men past it. The whistle shrieks into my teeth. Roll! The crew leans into the block. They're square under it now. I watch the count fall, and the railing grip ghosts in my hands. The sailcloth, the small shapes carried down, all of it, and I will not stand here and watch it happen twice. So I call it, loud. The whole yard hears. It comes off on the next bell. The instant it strikes, back, all of you. The overseer steps in and shoves me flat with the butt of his stick. One more word, boy, and I'll have your indenture burned. The temple bell starts. First stroke rolls across the terraces. On it, the cornice barks, a dry, deep crack down in the joint, and the men feel it through their boots before their heads catch up. I'm screaming, back, back, get back, and the number in my eyes hits its floor. The slab lets go. It peels off the wall whole, turns once in the air, and meets the yard where 6 men stood a breath ago. Stone bursts. A flat wheel of dust slams out. Grit stings my cheek. A roller snaps under the weight like a wishbone. Then the silence, the kind that rings. The men are sprawled on the cobbles, gasping, whole. The overseer stands with his whistle halfway to his lips, staring at the rubble, then at me, his face gone the color of the dust. I get up. My hands are shaking, and they're mine. I named the minute. The stone kept it. Corin! Garen comes off the ladder hard, boots slapping stone, grit raining where his hand catches the rail. He's seen it all from up top. His face is gray under the white beard. What in the deeps did you... I grab his sleeve before he finishes. Master, listen to me. The temple's next. The temple. The column. The shoulder above the doors. I'm pulling him round to face it, up past the granary, up to where the dome leans on its old stone. It's worse than this. 100 times worse. You have to call it unsafe. Today, clear the terraces under it. He looks where I point. He sees granite, sun, pigeons on the cornice line. He sees what everyone sees. You hit your head on the scaffold, he says. Sit down. I didn't hit my head. Then you'll sit because I say sit. His voice drops low. Careful, the way you'd talk a man off a ledge. Boy, that slab fell. Old mortar, bad season, it happens. It does not make you a, I named the bell. My voice cracks and I let it. I named the stroke, Garen. 6 men. You watched. Something moves behind his eyes. Doubt, maybe. Then his jaw sets and he kills it. I watched. He takes my face in one rough hand, almost gentle. And so did Renaud with his gray sash, standing there white as a corpse. You know what he heard? Not luck. Not a sharp lad. He heard prophets talk in a public yard. I don't care what he... The blow comes open-handed, fast, across the ear. Bright noise rings through my skull. The yard tilts and rights itself. My eyes water and I blink the temple back into focus, still burning behind everything, still counting. You will care. He's got both my shoulders now, and he's shaking, the old hands hard as the stone they've cut for 50 years. Listen, because I'll say it once. The guild does not hang thieves quick as it hangs a man who stands in a yard and swears the city's falling. Panic empties markets. Empty markets cost Danecoin. They have a rope for that. They've used it. Then they can hang me after, I say. Not before she's off the before nothing. Spit flexes beard. You think your dead minute saved you? It marked you. Renaud's already gone up the steps to tell someone. You're a boy with no kin, bound to an old fool, and tomorrow you could be bound to a beam. His grandfather hauled this stone up from the river. He told me that once. Proud. He believes in the column the way he believes in his own hands. I'm asking him to call both of them liars, and I can see it isn't going to come. Master, no. He says it like a door shutting. Not another word of it. Not here. Not anywhere a sash can hear. So I stop. I let my arm go slack in his grip. I look past his shoulder because I can't keep looking at his face, and that's when I see her. Across the yard, by the cistern steps, a girl with a basket of wicks on her hip. Sarah. Small, sun in her hair, a smear of lamp soot on her wrist, watching the men climb out of the dust with her mouth open. 8 years old and breathing. The child I died on a market morning and came back wrong to find, right there. 40 paces and a low wall between us. The whole world goes quiet around her, the way a struck bell rings into silence. She lives on the terraces, the ones under the shoulder, the ones I watched come down with everything in them, and her name was on the list I read in another life, halfway up the second page. Garen's still talking. I don't hear the words. I'm counting again. I can't not, and the deep number behind my eyes hasn't paused for any of this. Not for the slab, not for his hand across my ear. It fell while I begged. It's falling while she balances a basket of wicks on her hip and grins at men who almost died. Garen wants me silent and safe. Renaud wants me roped. The column wants its hour. And it doesn't care that I just found her face in the crowd. It is still letting out its long, slow breath, and when it finishes, that wall behind her comes down on her head. I have 71 hours. Less now. Always less. The guild hall crowns the terrace, above the dust, where the stone stays cool even at midday. I went up before I could talk myself out of it, slipped through the side gate behind a delivery cart, under a porter's arm, up the polished steps 2 at a time. Nobody stops a boy carrying nothing. Their mistake. Inside, the noise of the yard just dies. No grit underfoot, no hammer ring. Only lamp oil, old paper, and the low talk of men who've never split a stone in their lives. I knew the room before I saw it, knew it from the file. He sits at the far end of a long oak table. Vorik Stain, guildmaster. Smaller than I'd built him in my head, and worse for it. Neat gray coat, soft hands, a face shaved so close it shines. A face with no fault line anywhere in it. Dressed and polished and sealed, like his own best stone. A quarry agent leans across the table, sweating. Between them sit a sheet of paper and a stick of red wax. The Tallow Row grade, the agent says. Your inspectors flagged it soft. My inspectors flag a great deal. Stain doesn't look up. Coin unflags most of it. He dips a pen, signs. The signature is small and certain. Then he lifts a brass seal from the block at his elbow, holds it to the candle, and presses it into the wax. A wet click. A terrace certified. Soft stone called sound, and 3 streets that'll trust it tonight. No granite glows in this room. No crimson. No count behind my eyes. Nothing to read. Just a pen and a pot of wax, and that's the part I never got to witness. This is where the red begins. On paper, in a cool room, by a clean hand. You, boy! A gray sash steps out from the shadow of the pillar. Renaud. Whistle still on his chest, color still gone from his face. His finger comes up, leveled at me. That's him. That's the one. Name the slabs fall like scripture in front of my whole crew. The room turns. The agent. 2 clerks. Stain last of all, raising his head slow, grudging the effort. He looks at me, mild, patient, a man checking a tool for cracks. So you're the prophet. Not a question. Something close to a smile sits in it. Garin Stray. Corin. My voice comes out level. I don't know how. Corin. He sets the seal down, square to the table's edge. They tell me you've been frightening haulers, telling honest men the temple means to fall on their heads. I should bow. I should lie soft and slip out the door. I can't make my legs do it, because I'm staring at the seal cooling in the wax, the wreathed hammer, the nick worn into its left tine, the same small flaw that bit the same shape into every page he ever stamped. I held one of those pages once. They passed it to me across a different table, in a colder room, my daughter's name written under that mark, and a single word inked below it. Closed. He signed her terrace sound in the spring, then he signed her file shut in the autumn, after. Now here he sits, warm and breathing, already reaching for the next sheet of paper, not knowing the boy in his doorway has buried what he's about to sell. The temple's going to fall, I say. The column of St. Tev, 69 hours, maybe less. I came to tell you while there's still time to clear the terraces. The room doesn't gasp. That's the first wrong thing. Stain's hand is already on the next sheet. It stops. He smooths the paper flat with 2 fingers, like he's deciding whether I'm worth the wax. The column, he says it kindly. My masons recut that base last spring. I signed the work myself. I know you did. The words come up out of me before I can dress them. The base is where it starts. The shoulder above the doors carries the load now, and it can't. It's letting go already. You can't see it. I can. A clerk laughs, short, nervous, choked off when nobody joins him. Stain stands, not fast. He rounds the table the way a man crosses his own kitchen, unhurried, certain of every board under his feet. He stops an arm's length off and looks me over, chin to boots, the way you'd price a colt. You can see it, he repeats, through 3 feet of granite. Yes, and every other master in Caldros is blind. To this? Yes. He nods, slow, like I've confirmed a sum he ran in his head an hour ago. Then he turns, not to me, to the room. Write it down, he tells the Nera clerk. Today's date. The boy Corin, Garin's bound apprentice, came uninvited into Guildhall and declared the Saints' column doomed before witnesses. The pen scratches. Add the cutter's yard this morning. Same boy, same words. A hauler crew nearly bolted off a live job because of him. They didn't bolt, I say. The cornice came down. I called it. Ask Renaud. He was wearing the whistle when it fell. Renaud's face goes a worse color. I never. Quiet. Stain doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't have to. The whole gray sash bulk of Renaud folds shut. Stain comes back to me. Close now. I can smell the wax on him, sweetish, and under it something colder, like a cellar. You want to know what you are? He says, almost gentle. There's a word for a man who walks into a working city and tells the haulers the stones mean to murder them. A man who empties a quarter on a feeling and lets the looters in behind. We've a long memory for that word here. We string it up at the river gate so the gulls can have a look. Panic sower. He doesn't say it. He lets it sit in the air where I can taste it. In Caldros, that word ends in hemp. I'm not emptying anything, I say. My voice holds. I hate how much that costs. I'm asking you to send 1 inspector with a plumb line and a chisel to the shoulder above the doors. 1 hour. If I'm wrong, rope me yourself. For half a breath I think it lands. His eyes flick. Once. toward the high window, toward the terrace, toward the column standing white and patient over all of it. Then he looks back, and there's nothing there. He didn't weigh the stone. He weighed me. Garen's stray climbs into my hall and instructs me where to send my men. A thin smile. No. He lifts 2 fingers, doesn't even glance to see who answers. A door I hadn't marked opens behind the pillars. 2 of them come out, not gray sashes, no whistles. Quieter men. Leather aprons gone dark at the chest. One carries a short iron pot on a chain, coals breathing orange inside it, and a brand resting in the coals with its business end already dull red. My stomach drops clean through the cool stone floor. "Mark him," Stain says. "Wandering tongue." So the next overseer who finds him scaring a crew knows what he is before he opens his mouth. The nearer one takes my wrist. The grip is bored, practiced, awful. The other lifts the brand, and I see the shape glowing on it. A small, open mouth, a line struck through it. They've done this before. They have a tool for it. "You won't inspect the stone," I say. I'm pulling now, heels skidding on the polish, saying it loud so the clerks have to hear. 69 hours, and you'd rather burn the boy than send 1 man up a ladder. Write that down too. The brand swings toward my cheek. Heat reaches me first. A dry red breath on the skin under my eye, close enough that the little hairs there curl and stink. Stain has already turned away. He's reaching for the next sheet. Sarah's wall stands in my mind, full of people, and the iron is 1 inch from my face and dropping. "Bet me," I say. It comes out, scorched flat, loud enough to climb the rafters. The iron stops. Not far, a breath off the bone, that dry red heat still curling the little hairs under my eye. But it stops. Stain's hand rests on the next sheet. He doesn't turn. "Bet you. You won't send a man up a ladder." "Fine." I throw my chin at the tall doors standing open behind him, open on the cutter's yard 2 floors down, on the wide gate the haulers walk under all day, on the crowd already thick at it because word runs fast when a boy's about to burn. Then look at your own gate. The lintel over it, the long gray one. Heads tip back in the yard, faces, dozens, turned up at the hall mouth. I pitch my voice so it lands on every one. To them, that lintel is gray, dead, dull. To me, it runs wet. A red seam crawls its underbelly where the bed's gone to powder, and the wall above leans down onto it with everything it's got. The count drops behind my eyes. Quicker than I'd like. It comes down inside the hour, I say. On its own, nobody near it. Brand me after it stands. A clerk titters. Another picks it up. The laugh spreads thin across the hall, and Stain lets it, and that's when I know I've hooked him. Because a sure man kills a joke fast, and he's letting this one breathe. He turns, crosses back to me, easy. He studies the gate, then my face, weighing whether the show is worth the wait. "Hold the iron there," he tells the apron men. To me, almost kind. "We'll wait the hour. I want them to watch you eat it." The grip on my wrist never loosens. The coal pot breathes against my arm, orange, patient. A clerk fills the silence by reading my Rivergate sentence aloud, slow, savoring the hemp in it. Renaud breathes through his nose somewhere behind. I keep my eyes on the gate and nowhere else. The red deepens. The seam widens to a vein, the vein to a wound. Down in the yard, a hauler leads an ox cart toward the arch, straight under it. "Off the gate!" My voice tears loose. "You, with the cart, back the ox out, now!" The man looks up, startled. Stain's mouth curls. "Let him pass." "Back it out!" I'm pulling, heels skidding, shouting past Stain like he's furniture. "Hour's done. It's done now." The lintel groaned, not loud. A long stone sigh. The sound a thing makes when it finally quits. The hauler froze. Then a crack opened along the gray underside, dust spat down in a yellow rope, and the whole long block let go. It came off the gate in 2 pieces, hit the cobbles where the ox would have stood, where the man would have stood had he kept walking one more breath. The crash went up through the floor and into my teeth. White dust bloomed and swallowed the arch. Then the screaming, then the scramble back. Then, quiet. The quiet I came for. The crowd that climbed up here to see me hang stood in the settling dust and did not look at me. They looked at the rubble. Then, every face at once, up at the man beside me. Stain wasn't moving. His hand had gone flat and white on the sheet. He stared at the broken gate, at the gap where a stone he'd never thought about had been, and for the first time the smoothness was gone clean off his face. The pen rolled off the table. Nobody picked it up. He'd weighed me. Now he was looking at the stone. The dust came down slow, a fine gray flour settling on my shoulders, on the split table, on the ink still wet where Stain's pen had quit the page. My wrist throbbed where the apron men pinned it. The coal pot ticked beside my arm, going cold. Then a hand closed over the iron. Not to use it, to take it down. Garin. The old master shouldered between the apron men, pried his thumb under their grip, and worked my wrist loose without once looking at Stain. "Let the boy go," he said. The apron men glanced to Stain. Stain said nothing. He was still staring at the broken gate. Garin turned me by the arm, the same hand that had cracked across my mouth this morning on the scaffold. I felt the old calluses through my sleeve. He put his face close to mine. "Say it again," he said, low, only for me. "The shoulder, above the doors. Say it the way you said it to him." This was the man who'd told me to swallow my tongue or lose it. Now he wanted every word of it. "The base is recut and lying," I said. "The shoulder above the doors takes the load the base won't hold. It's pressing the column down from the top. 68 hours, maybe less." He didn't laugh. He didn't call me a fevered boy. He stood there turning it behind his eyes, an old quarryman doing in his skull the thing I do with mine, and something in his jaw came unset. "I cut stone 40 years, he said. "Felt that lintel sweat last winter, called it green wood and walked under it." His voice went to gravel. "I let them seal it. You can still clear the terraces," I said. A voice came up out of the yard then, a woman's, flat and carrying, pitched to ride over hammers. "How many hours did you say?" The crowd opened. Tessa climbed into the hall mouth. Quarry foreman, sleeves shoved past the elbow, gray to the wrist, a plumb bob swinging from her fist where she'd hauled it up the steps. She stopped square in front of me. She didn't look at Stain either. "The column," she said. "How many?" 68. The shoulder goes first." She looked at the rubble jamming the gate. She pinched the powder off her own thumb, rolled it, smelled it. Then she turned her head to the haulers packed behind her and jerked her chin. "Ladders to the door shoulder. Bring plumb and a chisel. We sound it ourselves." Stain forbade an inspect. A clerk began. "Stain can read his answer in the dust," she said, and didn't slow. She laid her hand flat on my shoulder, heavy, a working hand, the grip of somebody who lifts weight she trusts, and never the kind she doesn't. The first hand on me all day that wasn't holding me down. "You point," she said. "We dig." Since I woke in this skin, I'd been one mouth shouting at a clock nobody else could hear. Now ladders were moving in the yard. An old man counted under his breath at my left. A foreman stood at my right, with her crew already turning to the doors, hands that believed me and meant to prove it. Down. Tessa hit the pit stair, and I went after her, out of the dusty hall mouth into cold air that tasted of wet grit and split rock. The Guild quarry opened under the hillside, a stepped bowl, gray shelves dropping away, a man with a pick on every bench. Their hammers came up to meet us, talk, 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 steady. Men who'd heard nothing about a fallen lintel and cared less. "Which face fed the column base?" I said. She swung the plumb bob toward the far wall. "West bench, cut last spring, rushed job, double cruise." We started down. A man came off the bottom shelf and planted himself in the stair. Broad leather apron, a brass measuring rod held across his chest like a bar across a door. "Foreman?" Flat as the rod. "All set, no word down." "You don't walk my benches today." "Walking them, Das," Tessa said, and didn't stop. He shifted to fill the gap. With a branded, "Not branded." I turned my cheek to him. "Look." His eyes went to the clean skin and soured. He caught my arm above the elbow, fingers digging. Pups stayed topside. Tessa stepped in, laid the plumb bob flat against his chest. "Lintel just came off the hauler's gate, Doss. The boy called it to the breath. You want to be the man who stopped me checking the rock under that?" His grip held one beat too long. Then it opened. I went past him to the west face. The rock lit the second I looked. Not the slow burn of loaded weight. This was the grain itself, threaded wrong, pale veins running crosswise through the bed where Templestone runs true and tight. I pressed my palm to the cut. It gave a breath of damp under my skin. Soft, fault shot clean through. The kind of rock that holds steady in your hand and quits the moment a roof leans on it. Above me, a cutter drove his pick, and a slab broke free too easy, came away in his arms light, too light. He grinned at the easy work. He had no idea what he was cradling. I crossed to the finished pile by the loading sled. Dressed blocks, faces planed smooth, edges squared to temple grade. Beautiful work. A lie with good corners. The mason's mark sat chiseled into the top course, the guild seal pressed deep. The tine was nicked. Same nick. The same broken tooth that stamped the cornice this morning. The same mark that signed off the stone that killed my girl. In a life this body never lived. My breath went out of me slow. This wasn't the column's old sin-curing quiet underground, done and buried. The benches were still working. The sled was loaded and roped. Another course of it was going up the hill today, under everyone's hands, blessed and sound. "Doss," I said, not turning around. "Where does this sled run?" A pause behind me. "Terraces, retaining course." "Which terrace?" "Under the shoulder." Under the shoulder. Under the row where the girl slept tonight. The master's shed leaned against the north wall, planks tarred black, the padlock hanging open on its hasp. I left the sled. Tessa came at my shoulder, plumb bob still in her fist. "Doss!" She kept it light. "Where's your master keep the run tallies?" He flicked his brass rod toward the shed and turned back to his benches. He thought paper was nothing. Men in his trade always do. I lifted the lock off and pushed the door in. Pitch, cold, old candle grease. A gray bar of light from one slit window lay across a work table. Stamping irons. A whole rack of them hung by their handles. I knew the shape before my fingers closed on it. Took the third one down. Turned its face up to the light. The tine was nicked. The iron that signed the cornice this morning. The iron that signed the stone that killed my girl. It lived here, on a peg, oiled and warm-handled from a day's work. My thumb went white on the wood. Under the iron sat a shallow tray. Wax discs, poured and pressed, dozens of them. The guild seal standing proud in every one. Inspection passes, already stamped. I tipped one to the light and read the date pressed into it. 3 weeks out. Passes for stone that hadn't been cut yet. You don't forge tomorrow's seal by accident. Tessa, the book. My voice came out thin. On the shelf. She slid a long ledger down. Leather, swollen with damp. We spread it on the table between us and turned the stiff pages. Columns ruled fine. Bench, coarse, grade. The west bench, the soft rock, the rock that gave a breath of damp under my palm not 10 paces back, entered down the page fair and sound, line after line, certified temple grade. And down the right margin, in the same tight backslant that took down my warning in the hall this morning, one signature, repeated, page on page on page. Stain, stain, stain. His own hand, dated, owning every lie in long, neat rows. A building can't climb the dais and name the man who hollowed it. This could. I had it now, the one thing that wouldn't be shouted down in a hall or buried under 67 hours of falling rock. I shut the book on my forearm and pressed it flat to my ribs, under the apron. Light moved on the window, a lantern, swinging, coming up the bench line. Boots crunching grit, unhurried, then not. Doss's voice, low, to someone behind him I couldn't see, shed standing open. Tessa's fingers closed on my sleeve. The gray bar across the table swelled, went gold, and crawled toward the open door, and the flame behind it threw a long shadow that wasn't ours across the planks of the floor. The door slammed back on its hinges, and Doss filled it, lantern high. His eyes dropped to the shape under my apron. His face came apart. The book! He spun on his heel and roared down the bench line. "They've got Stain's book! Seal the mouth! Seal it!" So much for paper being nothing. Two men in guild leather were already moving up the gallery, batons loose in their fists, and behind them a third was hauling the great timber bar across the quarry mouth where daylight should have been. The bar dropped into its brackets. The light went out like a snuffed wick. Tessa had her plumb bob reversed in her hand, lead first. "Back door's barred too," she said. "There's only the one road up." "No," I grabbed her wrist. "There's two." I'd seen the second one walking in and hated it. A worked-out drift off the west bench, low, abandoned, its mouth half choked with spoil. The roof up there had been screaming at me since I crossed the floor. Not the loud crimson of a loaded column, but the slow, rot red of rock that's been holding too long with nothing under it. Pillars robbed for stone years back. A ceiling owed a debt and ready to pay it. A baton cracked the doorframe by my ear. I went under it. "Drift," I said, and pulled her into the dark. Doss's lantern chased us, throwing our shadows long up the ribs of the tunnel. "Don't go in the Old West cut," he bellowed, and not at us, at his own men. "That ground's no good, it's been—" He knew. Of course he knew. He'd robbed those pillars himself. The drift mouth swallowed us. I felt the air change, close and dead, tasting of wet chalk. Above me the roof bled. Threads of red ran the whole span, fattest along a cross seam 30 feet in, pulsing the way a thing pulses right before it lets go, counting down. Ours had become a handful of breaths. "Fast," I said. "Quiet. Hug the right rib." Behind us, the leather boots checked at the threshold. The light hung there, swinging, the men's nerve and Doss's order pulling against each other in the dark. Then one fool came on anyway. I felt it before I heard it. The seam over the cross drew its breath in, that lean of pressure where nothing should lean. "Down," I hissed, and shoved Tessa flat against the wall. The roof let go behind us. Not all of it. Enough. A slab the size of a cart bed peeled off the crossseam and came down in a gout of grit and thunder, and the lantern light vanished under it, and a man screamed once and then only swore, alive, pinned somewhere short of us in a wall of fallen rock. Doss's voice, far off now, muffled through stone. "Out! Get out! Leave it! Nobody follows into that!" Nobody would. I'd read the price, and they'd just watched the bill come due. Tessa was up, blood black on her cheek where chalk had cut her, the ledger still locked against my ribs, the leather slick under my forearm with sweat. We crawled the last of the drift over the new spill, the roof ticking and settling at our backs. A seam of pale gray opened ahead. Sky, real sky, through a foxhole gap in the spoil. I jammed my shoulder into it, heaved, felt skin tear off my back on the broken edge, and burst up into the afternoon glare, gulping air that didn't taste of the grave. We rolled clear of the hole. I clamped the book to my chest and ran. "Warden Isel!" I called it across the terrace the second I saw her. I'd run the quarry road up to the shoulder with the book locked to my ribs, Tessa astride behind, and I didn't slow now. She stood on the retaining course with 2 clerks and a knot of haulers, the loaded sled creaking at her back, roped and ready to climb. I went up the course in 3 strides and threw the ledger open on the flat stone at her boots. "Stain's hand," I said, loud for all of them. "Page after page. The West Bench certified temple grade, and you all know what the West Bench is." Tessa hit the stone beside me and slapped down the tray of wax passes. "Dated 3 weeks on," she said. "Seals for rock still in the ground." A man shoved through the haulers. Guild leather, gray at the temples, a tally stick in his fist. Stain's yard deputy, Hask. "Don't let him near the warden." He came for the ledger with both hands. "He's branded. Look at his arm. That's a stolen book. The boy's a—" "Read the date," I said. He didn't. He grabbed for the passes instead. Isel's clerk got a wrist in the way, the wax skidded, and Hask's own thumb came down on a seal as he held it up shouting, "This proves nothing!" It's dated the 11th of next month, Isel said. Quiet. She was reading it. The terrace went still under the afternoon glare. I turned my back on him and put my palm flat on the cornerstone of the retaining course, the one block holding the whole shoulder up, and the stone lit under my hand, crimson, fat, a seam running the joint and pulsing where the load bit down. My throat closed. Sarah's terrace. The thing that buries her sat under my own hand, counting. This block, I said, harder than I meant. Not the column yet. This one, right here, under your sled. I dragged my thumb down the joint. It's weeping. Send a man. Now. Hask laughed, ugly. The roof of a worked-out drift came down on on a man who didn't listen. I found the nearest hauler, a big one with rope-burned hands. Kneel, thumb the joint, low corner, where the damp sits. Tell them what's on your thumb. He looked to Isel. She tipped her chin. He knelt, ran his thumb along the seam, stood, and held it up. Grit. Fresh stone flour, pale, sifting from a joint that should have been dry as a kiln. That's the stone giving up, I said. And the column over the shoulder is doing it 60 times worse. I count 66 hours. You don't have to take my number. Watch this course. It splits this corner before the midnight bells. When it does, you'll know every signature in that book is a death warrant signed before the funeral. Hask reached for my collar. Tessa's plumb bob came up between us, led first, and he thought better of it. Behind the haulers, a voice said my name. That's the Cornice boy. Called the granary down to the minute. Then another, a woman, higher. Corin, the one Garen took the brand off. It moved. It went up the terrace, mouth to mouth, past the clerks, up the cut steps toward the shoulder, where men who'd had their backs to me an hour ago turned now to look down. Corin, the name climbing the stone faster than I could have run it. Hask was still shouting into all of it. Not one soul on the terrace had their ear on Hask anymore. Isel closed the ledger with one finger, and I knew before she spoke that I'd won her ear and nothing under it. You'll watch the course, I said. Good. Now pull the sled off the shoulder. I'll watch the course. She handed the book to her clerk, not to me. I don't pull a guild sled on a branded boy's word and a thumb of dust. They dress every stone in Caldros. I move against them. I need their seal broken in front of witnesses who matter, not haulers. They matter to the ones it falls on. They don't sign warrants. Her eyes weren't unkind. That was worse. Ear, not writ. The red kept sliding down the joint under my boots while she stood here weighing names, and the names were going to run out before the count did. Then the crowd opened. A man came up the cut steps without hurry. Good gray wool, dry boots, soft hands, the only dry thing on a terrace running with sweat and quarry grit. No tally stick, no iron. He smiled at me like he'd hunted me a long while and was glad to find me whole. Hask, he said, not turning. You've made noise enough. Hask shut his mouth. The man crouched easy by the open passes, touched one wax seal with a clean nail, and didn't read it. He read me, the brand on my arm, the apprentice cut of my tunic, my face, slow, filing it away tooth by tooth. Corin, he said, tasting it. The Cornice boy. Master Stain wondered which boy his foreman went soft over. Now I can tell him. He stood. He likes a name spelled right. Spell mine, I said. I'll spell yours back. Whose hand dated those passes 3 weeks on? His or yours? His smile didn't move. That told me plenty. You dropped a drift roof on a man this morning, he said, gentle. Pitched for me alone while the haulers leaned in and caught nothing. Roofs come down on the clever the same as the slow. A boy with no kin and no roll, no one asks after him. His glance slid to Tessa, to the chalk cut on her cheek. Nor a foreman who picks the wrong side at her age. Warden standing right there. The warden goes home at dark. He bowed his head to Isel, all courtesy. We'll watch the course together till the bells then. He went down the steps the way he'd come, unhurried, and the crowd that had been chanting my name a breath before let him pass without a single hand laid on him. I put my palm back on the cornerstone. The crimson had crept a finger higher up the joint while I'd stood there trading names, Sarah's terrace, counting down under my own hand. and a smiling man who now knew my face was walking off to carry it to the one I'd come to break. 2 drumbeats, flat and close. The terrace stopped. A second guild man came up the cut steps the fixer had just gone down. Brass chain, clean jaw, a writ rolled fat with Stain's wax. He didn't waste a glance on me. He found the thick of the crowd and set his boots. "By order of Master Stain, Master of the Stone Guild." His voice carried better than mine ever would. He cracked the seal with his thumb and let the writ fall open to his knee. I knew the shape of it before a word landed. Power doesn't argue. Power signs. "The quarries of Caldros are sealed under guild lock from this hour. No block moves without a dated pass. No dressed stone leaves a yard. Any hand that cuts, hauls, or sells against this order forfeits his role and his trade." A murmur ran the terrace. He talked over it. "Further, the foreman Tessa and every crew beneath her are named oath-breakers this day and struck from the rolls. No guild man works beside them. No yard serves them. No gate opens to them." Tessa didn't flinch. The chalk cut stood out white on her cheek. "Struck," she said, like testing a tooth that's already dead. I turned from him and went hunting with my eyes, fast, because the joint under my boots was bleeding hours. The terrace was packed with men who knew rock. I found the gray-bearded one who'd said my name. "Bessemer Yard, you've dressed lintels stacked 3 deep. I need 6, and beams, and 40 men on ropes before the bells." He'd leaned toward me a breath ago. Now he leaned back. His eyes went to the writ, to the brass chain, and the warmth went out of his face like heat off a doused iron. "My roll," he said, quiet, ashamed, and not moving. "I've got sons on that roll. There's a child under this shoulder. There's 40 families on mine." He stepped back. The crowd took him. I went to the next. A sledge captain, shoulders built for the trade. Same drop of the chin, same feet finding a reason to be elsewhere. One after another, they peeled off the second my need touched them. Not because they doubted, they'd seen the thumb of dust, they'd chanted my name, but because Stain had just laid their bread on the scale against a stranger's word. Hask was grinning now. Of course he was. I swung to Azelle. She'd read the writ over her clerk's shoulder and set it down. "That's within his right," she said, "and within yours to be afraid of it. I don't break a lawful order on a thumb of dust." "It's not lawful. It's a lid on a boiling pot. Break the seal before witnesses who matter." Her chin stayed level. "Or watch the course with me till the bells." I looked up at the loaded sled, roped on the shoulder above us. Guildstone, guild lock. The one block I might have placed tonight, and the writ had just nailed it where it sat. A dying course. The count burning in my eyes, and no stone, no cart, no crew, but Tessa and whatever Garen could carry out of a guild that had outlawed us both. Every door on this terrace had shut between 2 drumbeats, and I'd watched each one close on a man's face that wanted to say yes. The herald rolled his writ and turned to go. He paused at the top step, mild, just for me. "Master Stain says, shore it with your own 2 hands, Cornice boy." He went down. I pressed my palm flat to the cornerstone, the way I'd once pressed it to granite over my girl, and the crimson slid another thread down the joint under my fingers, and there was not one thing left in Caldros they'd let me lift to stop it. I left the terrace at a dead run, down the cut steps, into the lane that fed Tallow Row, a boy's untrained lungs already tearing. I knew where men like Stain reached when your own door wouldn't open. They reached for the smallest hand in the house, Sarah's hand. The lamp girl over the chandler's stair, the whole reason I dragged myself back through the dark. The chandler's shutters were down at this hour. Wrong. 2 horses stood hitched to his rail, flanks dark with sweat, and nobody on this lane had ever owned a horse. Then I heard her, not a scream, that small, careful voice a child finds when she's been told to be brave and isn't. "He's not here. I keep telling you, he's not here." I came round the corner hard, 2 men at her door, not guild brass, the other sort, the kind Stain keeps off the rolls on purpose. One had a boot wedged in the door frame so she couldn't shut it. The other had her wrist. "Off her," The doorframe one turned. Not startled, pleased. Cornice boy. Someone had handed him my face too. Easy, we're just asking after a friend. Girl says you're not home. I crossed the lane, got my shoulder past the wristman, put my body in front of hers, and felt two small fists knot up in the back of my shirt. The wristman didn't let go for me. He glanced at his partner, got a nod, and then let go. They wanted me to see the choosing. That was the whole errand. I checked the lintel over her head out of old habit. Quiet. No crimson in it. The one stone in this town not counting down toward her. And these two had strolled right under it to stand at her door. There, the doorframe man said, easy as weather. Master Stain wondered if you had people. Now we can tell him you do. He looked down at Sarah, slow, learning her face. Lamp girl, top of the Chandler's stair, burns a light in the window, easy to find after dark. Something in me dropped below cold. I took his braced hand and bent the thumb the way a thumb does not go. I've set enough broken men to know exactly where it stops. He folded. Down to one knee in the muck, breath whistling, boot sliding out of the door. You found my people, I said into his ear. Now you've found me. Tell Stain I count what's loaded. I'll count his roof. I'll count the floor under his bed. A hair further. Tell him the Cornice boy says thank you. The partner's hand twitched toward his belt. Up the lane, shutters were cracking open. The Chandler, the dye woman, faces that had chanted my name on the terrace an hour ago. Too many eyes for the work these two had been sent to do. I let the thumb go. He scrabbled up, cradling the hand, and they took their horses and went, unhurried, because a slow leaving says, we'll come back, plainer than any threat. I got Sarah inside and dropped the bar. She shook against my ribs, asking who they were, and I had no clean answer to give a child. He had found her. Of everything I'd torn open today, that was the one he'd reached. The single light I'd come back through death to keep lit, and he'd put two men under it to show me he could snuff it whenever he pleased. I knelt to her eye and made her look at me. Nobody takes you, I said. Not one of them. Not while I'm breathing. I checked the bar again, then the window latch, then the bar. We move you tonight. Somewhere with no stair and no light in the glass. I didn't crawl back to the terrace to beg. I came down to the timber yard behind the Chandlers, where the light was going amber and the guild's rejects rotted in stacks no yard would ever stamp. Tessa was waiting. Garen stood beside her with a salvaged oak beam balanced on one shoulder, easy, like it weighed nothing. And behind them, a loose knot of others, men with no role to forfeit because the guild had never let them carry one. Two dockhands, a carpenter named Wick with a fro through his belt, the dye woman from the lane, sleeves still purple to the elbow. You've got no stone, Cornice boy, the bigger dockhand said, folded arms. Whole town's locked. What are we lifting, air? I walked past him to the reject pile. This. I slapped a cracked lintel, the very twin of the one that came down at the guild gate. And that. And the cornice they'll let rot because it dropped off a doomed building. I let my hand rest on the cold limestone and felt for the count. Nothing. Quiet stone. Sound. The guild stamps a seal, not the rock. Half their rejects are stronger than what they sold Tallow Row. Wick spat. Can't tell rotten from sound by looking. You can't. I can. And I'll teach your hands to. I picked up two offcuts, tapped the first with my knuckle, a dead, flat thud. The sound of a stone already grieving inside. Tapped the second, a clean ring that sat in your teeth. Hear that? Dead one rings dull, sound one sings. I pressed the dead block's joint and worked my thumb across it. Pale grit came up under my nail. And it weeps. Stone flour at a seam means the crack's already eating. You don't argue with flour. You set that one down and you walk away. The dye woman leaned in, ran her purple thumb along the seam, came up chalked. Her eyes changed. That's how you knew, she said. The cornerstone, on the terrace. That's how I knew. I went down on one knee and dragged a charred stick from the cold brazier, drew on a plank, fast, hard lines, no flourish. Not the guild's fat, solid course. A relieving arch, the load split and shunted sideways off the dying corner. A timber raker driving the thrust down into bedrock. The big dockhand frowned at it. That's not how it's built. That's not how they build. Their way put a girl under a column once. The stick snapped in my grip. I picked up the other half and kept drawing. Their way is law. Law isn't the same as standing. I shore to where the weight actually goes, not to where a master's diagram says it should. Garen set his beam down with a boom. I've hauled his calls already. 6 men walked home off one. He looked round at them, slow. He told me a stone would fall and named the minute. It fell on the minute. Silence. Wick worked the fro handle in his hands. No roll in this, I said, straight at them. No guild pay. I can't put coin on the table I don't have. I pay in salvage you carry off after. Beams, lead, dressed reject stone the guild would burn before they'd let you have. And I pay in this. I tapped my own temple. You'll leave here knowing how to read a wall that's lying to you. That outlives any roll. The big one chewed it. And if the warden's brass comes asking, then they find tradesmen stacking rubbish in a rotten yard. No law against rubbish. A beat. Tessa stepped to my drawing, put her finger on the raker line. My crew sets timber blind in the dark. We can cut this. Then cut it. Wick pulled the fro free and turned it once in the light. Show me the dead and singing again, he said, on a real one. Then I'm yours till the bells. I handed him the 2 offcuts. The dockhand uncrossed his arms and reached for the lintel. The dye woman was already sorting the pile, knuckle rapping, listening, setting the weepers aside. No guild, no writ, no pass. Just hands I'd taught to hear the stone, and a drawing in charcoal that didn't ask anyone's permission to hold. Sort them all by dark, I said, and grabbed a maul. We start cutting tonight. The knife found our strapline before I found the knife. Near midnight, under the column of St. Tever, 6 of us on the hall. The first crib a foot off the cobbles, Tessa calling the lift soft so the watch wouldn't hear. Garen and the 2 dockhands leaned into the rope. Wick stood ready with the raker. Then the left strap let go all at once. Not frayed. Cut. A clean slice through 3-strand hemp doesn't come from where. The crib slewed hard. 200 weight of lashed oak swung off our hands and dumped its whole weight sideways, down onto the dying foot of the column. The corner caught fire. My eyes did it before I could think. Crimson threads climbing the base stone, fat where the timber slammed in. The count in my skull dropping like a pebble down a dry well. 64 hours had been my number. The flare ate 3 of them in a breath. It's loading the corner! I was already moving. Off the wall side. I threw my shoulder under the swinging bulk and drove up and out, shoving the load back off the stone and onto me. Oak ground into my collarbone. My boots skated on grit. The count held, stopped falling, sat there red and trembling while my arms screamed. Garen, raker, now! He saw where my eyes were locked and didn't ask. Wick rammed the timber raker into the cobble joint and drove the head up under the crib. Garen threw his back across it. The weight came off my shoulder by inches and ran down the raker into bedrock, where I'd drawn it to go. The crimson quit climbing. The count stopped bleeding. I stayed bent a second, shaking, breathing grit. That strap was cut, Tessa said. Low, hard. I know. I came up off my knees. He's still here. You don't cut a line and run before it drops. You stay to watch it work. The dye woman's head came round first. She pointed with a purple hand. Lane side, by the rejects. A shape peeled off the dark and ran. Garen was nailed to the raker, holding the crib alive with his spine, so I went instead. Wick came with me, fro out. The man broke for the timber gap, and Wick's fro took him behind the knee. He went down on the cobbles. I had a fist in his collar before he could roll. Guild knife on his belt. Short, fine, a dresser's blade, and on the pommel, scratched deep, The nicked tine. Stain's mark. I held it up so they could all see the notch. He couldn't drop the column on us tonight, so he tried to drop our own work onto it and call us the reckless fools who cracked the saint's foot. The man spat at my boot. You're off the roll. Nothing you build holds. It just held. I let his collar go. Tessa, tie his hands. He watches us finish. We lashed him to the very raker he tried to kill us with. Then I read the foot again, slow, walking the base with my palm flat. The red sat banked and ugly where the drop had bruised the stone, but it sat. It wasn't climbing. I swiped charcoal across the 2 blocks where the threads ran fattest. Crib seats here, knuckle on the live seam. Raker drives to that crack, not the master centerline. Cut the wedges. We cut them by feel and lamp stub. Wick, split oak. The die woman sorted sound from weeping by ring, setting the dead ones aside. The dockhands hauled. Tessa set timber blind in the dark, her hands reading what her eyes couldn't, the way I'd taught her at dusk. Block by block, the crib went under the dying corner and took the load off the stone and put it in the ground. When Gray came up the river, the first crib stood seated and tight. I laid my hand against the column. The count had stopped falling. The saboteur watched all of it from the raker, jaw working, saying nothing. Tell Stain, I said. The cornice boy says it holds. Noon on Coppergate Terrace. Washing strung window to window, the herring stalls bawling below, the whole lane packed shoulder to shoulder for market day. Then the 3rd floor face of Maddox's tenement tore from lintel to sill with a sound like a green bough splitting. The crowd screamed and shoved back. A basket went over. Cabbages rolled down the gutter, and nobody chased them. My eyes lit the wall before the dust came down. Crimson forked up the party stone, fat and pulsing where the lintel had lost its bearing, the count in my skull dropping so fast it scared the breath out of me. Too fast. Far too fast. Out the ground floor, Maddox, clear it! I was already in the lane. The guild stood right there. A dresser in a gray apron, brass tine at his collar, arms folded under the awning. Nobody touches it, he said. Wall's condemned. We'll post it for taking down. It'll be rubble before you sharpen a pen. He stepped into Tessa as she came up under a load of shores, his palm flat on her shoulder, shoving her back. Off! You've no writ on this street. Then watch. I went past him. Wick, raker, the doorway. Garin, dead shore the center. 2 props, fast. The crimson told me where, not him. I slapped my hand low on the cold brick, where the count ran hottest, where the fork wanted to run. Heads here. Knuckle on the live seam. Not the corner. Here. Wick rammed the raker up under the cracked lintel and threw his weight on it. Garin set the first prop, footed it on a paving stone, drove the wedge home. The dockhand swung the second in beside it. Tessa read the angle blind, hands flat on the timber, setting it the way I'd taught her in the dark. The wall groaned. Spat mortar. The fork tried to climb. Then the red lifted a finger's width and stopped, banked hard behind the props. The count quit falling. I stood under 200 weight of leaning brick, with my crew's timber holding it off the street, and I breathed. Then the second crack opened. Higher. The window head split, and a slab of sill the size of a coffin lid leaned out over the lane. Brace! Long prop! The sill! Wick had it before I finished. He footed a raking shore in the gutter stone and ran it up to the underside of the sill, and Garin threw his back across the foot while I drove the head home with the maul. The slab settled onto the timber. The crimson banked, held, quiet, all at once. The whole terrace staring. A butcher's lad started it. The cornice boy! That's the cornice boy has held the saint's column! The lane took it up. Women leaned out over the washing and pointed. A name went round the cobbles, passed mouth to mouth, and not one mouth said Stain. That's when Stain came. He shouldered through the crowd in his good blue coat, 2 journeymen at his heels, and pulled up short when he saw it. The wall standing, my props under it, his own dresser by the awning, arms still folded, face gone the color of tallow. "This is guild ground," Stain said, loud for the crowd. "This work's not sanctioned. Pull it down." Nobody moved. A coster spat. Maddox planted himself in front of his own door with his children behind his knees. "Pull it down," Maddox said, "and the whole lane'll know who wanted the wall on top of my girls." Stain looked at the props. He's a stone man. He can read a working shore from a dead one at 20 paces. I watched him do the sum and hate the answer. His eyes came round to me, and they weren't looking at a madman off the roll. They were looking at a man standing on his stone, with the man's own street roaring, holding up the thing he'd written off to fall. "Cornice boy," he said. "Quiet now, just for me. Master Stain." I wiped the brick dust off my palms. "Come back at dusk. We'll be cutting the permanent seats." The terrace was still chanting it when he turned and walked. Stain didn't go far. He went for the law. He was back before the chant had cooled, and he didn't come alone. 2 city men in leather jerkins and a constable with a brass star on his chest. The law, walking ahead of the blue coat like the head of a maul. I still had the timber maul in my fist. Tessa was driving the last wedge on the sill shore. Then a hand closed on my collar and hauled. "Off the wall. It's the only thing holding the—" "You're taken." He cranked my arm up behind my back. Sowing panic, market day, tearing the face off a condemned house to put the fear in honest folk. There it was, the lie, spoken flat, with a charge nailed to it now. I didn't tear it, it tore. "Ask the whole lane. Ask the magistrate," Stain said. And I understood him. He couldn't pull my props with the street watching, couldn't outread me on stone in front of his own pale dresser. So he reached past all of it for the one thing he still owned, a writ, and a man with a star to serve it. "Tessa." I caught her eye as they turned me. "Touch nothing, not a wedge. You cut no seats without me." She started forward. A bailiff put a palm flat in her chest. They marched me off the terrace. I looked back once. The wall stood, my crimson banked behind the props, the count in my skull bleeding slow, holding, but only holding, only till dusk. Down through the herring stalls, brine and scale slick under my boots, a barrow boy gawping, the chant lost behind the corners. Up the moot hall steps, cold flags, a clerk's quill scratching. Magistrate Holt sat behind a table the size of a hay cart, his dinner still on his breath. Soft hands. A man who liked his afternoons undisturbed. "Master Stain, what's all this?" "This one." The finger came up. "Off the roll. No oath, no writ, no sanction. He's torn the front off a condemned tenement on Coppergate at the thick of Market and shorted with green wood to make a show of himself, half the quarter in a fright." I held it up, I said. "It's standing. Send a man and look." Held. Stain's voice went gentle, all of it for Holt. "He'll tell you he sees a wall dying, magistrate. Red light. He counts the hours to its falling in his own skull. The gutter named him for holding the saint's column. Ask him how he did it. He can't say. He's a lunatic, and tomorrow he'll work his trick on your street or your daughter's schoolyard wall." Holt's soft hands came together on the wood. "And what do you want of me, Stain?" Panic on a crowded street carries the rope. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Give me the rope. Let the quarter sleep tonight knowing the madman who frightened them is answered for." The hall went still. I watched the easy answer settle over Holt like flour off a split sack. "That's a stretch of neck for some props," Holt said, but slow, weighing, already half sold on a quiet evening. "It's order," Stain said. "Or it's every off-roll vagrant in the city tearing walls to play the hero." Holt's eyes moved to me, tired, comfortable, the eyes of a man choosing the lighter load. High in the wall, a window let the light in, and the light had begun to lean, gold now, slanting, the afternoon already tipping toward the hour I'd promised that wall. "Fetch the rope," Holt said, "and it comes down at dusk if no one cuts the seats." My voice cracked across the flags. "Maddox's children are under it. Hang me at dusk and you bury them by dark." Holt's hand stopped over the writ. Stain smiled, small, and reached for the pen himself. 2 men talking through the cell door. Bored, low, splitting a heel of bread between them. Chained the upper gates himself. Stain's own lock. On who say? Guilds? No carting folk out the top terrace. Bad for the name. I was off the bench before I knew I'd moved. 3 steps. That's the whole cell. 3 steps, a slop bucket, and a window the size of a loaf end. Barred, high in the street side wall. They'd thrown me in here while Holt finished his sentence and Stain finished my writ. Say that again. My face was at the door now. Which gates? The talk stopped. A boot scraped the flags. Nobody owes a dead man an answer. So I climbed, foot on the bench end, fingers hooked in the cold grate, hauling this stolen apprentice's body up till my eyes cleared the sill. The count was still ticking behind my skull, bleeding slow, the way a shore lets go one breath at a time while the wedges still hold. I couldn't see the wall from here, didn't need to. It dropped a notch and my gut dropped with it. A hiss came up from below the window. Boss, up here! Wick. Half a face wedged between 2 barrels in the yard, a scrape weeping down his cheek, breath sawing in and out. Talk to me, fast. They chained it. He pressed close, voice gone to almost nothing. Both upper gates. Stain walked a locksmith up the terrace and locked Maddox's whole row in. No carts out, no carrying anyone down the steps. Where's Tessa? Where's Garin? Over the back wall already, going for the little one. Izelle won't leave her da, and her da won't leave the... A shadow fell across him and swallowed the rest. Blue coat. Stain, standing in the yard with the brass star constable at his shoulder, looking down at my barrel boy like he'd found a rat in the grain. Off the prisoner's window. He didn't raise it. He took Wick by the collar and set him back 2 clean steps, the slow, easy way you'd shift a stool out of a doorway. Run home, Doc Rat. Tell the rest. The terrace is sealed under guild seal. First hand that touches that chain stands where he stands. A jerk of the chin at me, up in my slot of light, knuckles white around the iron. You wanted the quarter to look at you, Stain said. They're looking. A wall that fails is one tradesman's shame. A wall that fails and tips somebody's daughters into the gutter on market day. That's a story they tell for 40 years. He brushed brick dust off his cuff. So the gates stay shut. No carts, no crowd, no story. There are children behind that lock. There's a condemned house behind that lock. Flat, done. Condemned on the roll. My roll. They were never meant to be under it in the first place. Cut the chain, Stain. I'll cut the seats myself. You'll never hear my name again. I'll never hear it anyway. He turned to go. You'll keep till the magistrate's had his supper and signed. We'll see to you after dark. After dark. He gave me the hour like a man handing over the rope already knotted, and walked, and the constable walked after him, and the yard went empty and bright. Wick's face came back to the gap for one breath. Tessa'll reach her. I swear it on my hands, boss. Then he was gone too. I hung off the bars and shut my eyes and read the only thing I could still read, the number falling behind them. It wasn't bleeding slow anymore. Each drop was a wedge backing out of timber I'd set with my own hands, somewhere across the herring stalls, with nobody but Tessa to drive it home and a locked gate between her and the girl. On the far yard wall, the light had gone from gold to the dull orange of a coal about to gray. Dusk was climbing. I was 3 steps from a door that wouldn't open, and the count was running out faster than I could breathe. Stand him up! 2 hands under my arms and I was off the bench, blinking. The moot hall had filled while I sat in the dark. Lamps lit now, dusk pressed flat against the high windows, Holt at the long table with his supper still on his breath. 2 gray priests of St. Tever sat at his right, brought to lend the seal some weight. Stain stood at the rail with a roll of vellum thick as my wrist. He didn't look at me. He laid it out for the room. Master's seal. A disc of green wax thumped the table, ribbon through it. Sanctioned 19 years. Another. Cold Harbor Bridge. Another. The almshouse roof. Down they went, a row of little green moons. Inspected, signed, every one of them still standing. Then he let his voice drop. This boy carries no seal, no master. No name on any roll but the charge sheet. He turned to Holt. He reads stone the way a fair woman reads a palm. Lunacy dressed up as a trade. Hang it before it kills someone. The priests nodded, slow. Holt reached for the pen. I felt the wall before I turned to it. Not Maddox's, closer. A hum came up through the flags and into my back teeth, leaning, the way a thing leans when its footing's gone. The temple. St. Tever's own house made the whole east side of this hall. I turned, looked through the open arch, and the stone lit from the inside. "Your seals are dry, Stain." My voice carried farther than I meant. "Read me a wall that's still moving." "Sit him down," Stain said. "Let the boy talk." The older priest. Sharp eyes, no patience in them. I lifted my chained hands and pointed past the arch, at the temple's north buttress, where the red forked fat under the second window. There, the buttress by the rose window. You've a crack walking stair-step through the third course, finger wide at the top, hairline at the sill. Send a man up, now. Holt flicked 2 fingers. A clerk bolted for the yard. I didn't wait for him. The count was already behind my skull, the temple's own, slow but ticking. "Water's getting in behind that buttress. Every winter it freezes and walks the crack wider. You've rendered that face twice." The old priest's mouth came open. "Lime over old lime. I can see the seam from where I stand. It'll hold through summer. It will not hold a hard frost." The clerk's shout came back thin across the yard. "There's a crack, Your Honor. Stair-step, wide as the boy said." The hall went quiet. Even the lamp flames seemed to lean. "A man can spy a crack from 20 paces, Stain said. "Then I'll give you the hour." I swung to the bench, to Holt, to the priests gone still and forward in their chairs. "Not the crack, the morning it lets go. First hard frost after your own feast of St. Tever. Sun comes round and hits that face. The ice behind it melts, the load shifts, and the buttress walks off its base. You pin it before then, or you bury your choir under it." I dragged in a breath. "Stake whatever you want on me. I'll stake my neck. If that wall standing come spring, you can hang me twice." The old priest got to his feet. He looked from me to the temple, to the writ, and the green seal in his fist weighed nothing now. "Magistrate. Slow. Careful. Before you sign." I'd hear him on our south wall too. Holt's pen stopped over the page. Stain's hand closed white on the rail. He stepped in, square between me and the bench. "He stalls, Your Honor. Every minute he talks, his people are working that lock." Lock. The word went through me like cold water. Tessa, the gate, Izel. In the back of my skull, the other count, the one I'd nearly let slip, lurched and dropped 2 notches at once. The clerk hadn't cleared the top of the temple stair when the wall answered. It came up through the flags first, a low grind, stone bedding onto stone, the sound a thing makes when it quits pretending. Then a sheet of render let go above the rose window and dropped. It struck the choir roof and burst white. Lime dust drifted back across the dusk blue windows. Every head in the hall snapped to the open arch. In my sight, the crack forked fatter, crimson swelling under the second course. "On the minute," I said, and let my voice shake. "That's the wall agreeing with me." Stain found his feet fast. "Render sheds off old churches every week. Not on the breath, a boy names it." Father Adelm was at the arch now, both hands white on the rail, watching dust settle over his choir. He didn't argue. He'd heard the stone. I turned back to the long table, to the row of green seals laid out for the room. "You showed them all the ones still standing." My chained hands dragged across the vellum. "Cold Harbor, the almshouse, the bridge." I stopped. "Where's the column?" Stain went still. "Your house keeps a roll, Father." I held the old priest's eyes. "The names you read each feast, the ones the column of St. Tever took the spring it walked off its plinth into the crowd. Bring it." "The column was an act of God," Stain said, loud now. "No seal answers for. It carried your green wax." Quiet. "Sound and signed, the season it came down on a feast day." The sexton brought the book, heavy, foxed, a faded ribbon marking the place. Adelme laid it open, and the hall leaned in. A column of names in a careful clerk's hand. I took Staines' seals, the bridge, the almshouse, Cold Harbor, and set them on the page, one by one, green wax pressed down over the dead. Then my thumb found a name 3 lines down. I didn't have to read it. I'd cut that name into pine myself, in a life that wasn't this one, with hands that weren't these, knelt in the broken stone and lifted her out by the hem of her dress. This one. My voice came out wrong. She was 6. I laid Staines' seal beside her name, green wax, sound and certified, sitting on a child he'd sworn was safe. The hall made a noise, low, 100 throats catching at once. The 2 gray priests at Holt's right had stopped nodding. One had gone the color of tallow. Adelme closed the book gentle over my hand and faced the magistrate. He named the wall. The wall answered. The old priest's voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. I'll not bless a rope for the one man this town should have heeded 20 years gone. Holt looked at the writ. He looked at the green wax on the open page of his dead. Then he drew the pen back from the paper and set it down. Staines lunged for the book, the seals, his ruin, I couldn't tell. The brass star constable put a flat hand to his chest and pinned him to the rail. Don't, the constable said. The whole room that had filed in to watch me swing turned as one and looked instead at the master with a dead girl's name under his seal. Strike his irons. Holt didn't lift his eyes from the page. Now! The clerk fumbled the key. Cold iron came off my wrists and the blood roared back into my hands. I flexed them. Apprentice's knuckles, raw, mine to use again. Holt was already writing. Fast now, the lazy burned clean out of him. He blotted the lines, folded the sheet, dripped his own wax, not gild green, his own magistrate's black, and held it across the rail. Warden's writ, care of the Maddox child, command of that terrace till the danger's past, carts, men, whatever you call for. His jaw set. Don't make me regret the ink. I took it. The wax was still warm under my thumb. Staines wrenched against the constable's flat hand. That terrace is sealed under guild order. Overruled, Holt said, and didn't trouble to look at him. I turned to the hall. 100 faces that had filed in to watch me hang. Maddox's wall comes down at dusk, children under it. The gates are chained and I've got the paper to break the chain. I lifted the writ. I need backs, and I need them now. Who's coming? The room broke loose. Not all of it, enough. Dockmen, a fishwife with her sleeve still dripping, the sexton, the 2 gray cloaks who'd quit nodding for Staines. Boots came off the flags like a tide pulling out into the lane. Full dusk, the lamps guttering blue, frost already skinning the puddles at the gutter's lip. I went up Coppergate near a run, and the crowd came hard behind me, and somewhere under my ribs the count for those children slipped one more notch as we climbed. The cold was coming on. The cold was the whole problem. The terrace gates rose at the head of the lane, both leaves chained, links thick as my thumb, Staines' lock hanging under the guild's gray lead seal. 2 of his men stood across them. The near one I knew. Corm, broad, slow, a Guildhall billy loose in his fist. I stopped 6 feet off. The crowd packed in steaming behind me. Over the gate top I caught the gable's edge, and in my sight it was burning. Crimson forked up under the sill, fat and pulsing where the props took the bite, holding, barely, and swelling redder by the breath. Step off the gate, Corm. First hand on this chain takes the rope. He didn't shift. Master Staines' order, guild seal. You know the law as good as me. Law changed an hour back. I held the writ where the lamp caught the black wax, Holt's mark plain in it. Warden's writ. The terrace is mine. Step off. His eyes dropped to the seal, flicked past me to the wet faces, the sexton, the gray cloaks, back to the wax. He licked his teeth. I take that off a magistrate's own hand, he said, not a boy's. Up beyond the chain, behind the dark of the yard, a child began to cry. It went into me harder than any count ever has. Close. Just up the stair, a chained gate and a sealed lock between me and the thing I climbed here to stop. Corm. Quiet now. There's a 6-year-old behind that wall. I dug one out of broken stone once and she came up cold. My voice held flat and level. Now choose. Your name in the temple book under green wax, or the man who opened the gate. The billy sank an inch in his grip, then hooves on the cobbles behind us. Iron-shod, fast, driving up Coppergate at the gallop. The crowd split open. Staines' other man had ridden for the Guildhall. The Guildhall had sent its answer back at a full charge. The horse came up hard, and I turned my back on it. No time to argue with hooves. Iron! I threw my hand open behind me. A spike! A bar! Now! A dockman slapped a rusted mooring spike into my palm. Heavy, pitted, cold, good. Corm set his feet and raised the billy. I said don't! I wasn't going for the chain. My eye had already found where the gate would die, crimson seeping low in the right-hand post, fat and wet, where the lock staple bit into 20 years of rot. The links would hold all night. The wood holding the links wouldn't last a minute. Sexton, shoulder to the leaf, push when I shout. I jammed the spike behind the staple and threw everything I had down the bar. Corm swung. A gray cloak caught his wrist mid-air. Then 2 dockmen had him by the coat and folded him sideways off the gate, swearing, heavy and slow as a hauled net. The staple shrieked and tore. Plate, screws, a fist of black wood with it. Push! The leaf swung in on its slack chain and jammed half open. Enough. The crowd poured through the gap, steam and boots and the fishwife's elbows, up into the dark of the terrace yard. Behind me, hooves slithered to a stop on frost. The Guildhall man came off his horse hard, a fresh seal swinging from his fist on a foot of lead. Green sash, soft hands, loud voice. In the Guild's name, this property is sealed. Every hand off it. Overruled. An hour back. I didn't slow. I took the stair 2 at a time. Above the yard, the gable let go a sound. Long, low, grinding. I felt it in my teeth before I heard it. In my sight, the crimson up there was forking wider, swelling under the sill, the props eating a load no man had cut them to carry. The count in my skull dropped a notch, then another, faster. Top of the stair, the last door, the upper gate, chained, the Guild's gray lead seal hanging cold on Staines' lock. Beyond the bars, Maddox stood planted in his own threshold with Izelle wound round his neck, and Tessa and Garin hauled at his arms and couldn't shift him an inch. "He won't come," Tessa's voice cracked. "She won't let go and he won't move." "He'll move." I went at the gate. A hand closed on my collar and yanked. The Guildhall man, up the stair behind me, dragging me back off the lock. "You break that seal, boy, and you hang." I drove my elbow back into him without looking. He grunted and the grip slipped. This post was sound, no rot to read, no kindness in the grain. So I read the lock instead, the hasp, the seat of the staple, the line where iron met old oak. I set the spike's point in that seam and hammered the butt with my palm, once, twice, leaning my whole weight onto it. "Maddox!" I shouted through the bars. "Your girl came up cold in my arms once. I'll not carry her down again. Move!" Whether it was the words or the wood, I'll never know. The staple gave with a flat crack, and the lock came away in my hand, lead seal and all, swinging dead on its chain. The gate burst inward. The whole house groaned around us then, a deep, wet, splitting note out of the stone over our heads, the gable shifting, the crimson flaring so bright it washed the dark to dull yellow. Maddox's head came up. He felt it too now. Everyone did. Izelle's small voice, right past the open gate. "Da! Da! The wall's talking!" The count dropped 3 notches between one breath and the next. I had the door open. I had the guildsman a step below me. And I had a stubborn father, a child who wouldn't let go, 2 gray-faced helpers, and 1 narrow stair between all of us and the lane, while 10 feet of dressed stone overhead finished deciding, right now, that it was done holding. 0. The count hit the floor of my skull and had nowhere left to fall. "Now!" I had Ezel by the waist before the word cleared my teeth, tore her off Maddox's neck, a button ripping loose between her fingers. She shrieked in my ear. Good. Screaming children breathe. And the man came unstuck the instant her weight left him. Whatever pinned his boots to that threshold, it broke when his daughter did. He fell forward into me, into Tessa, all of us tangling back through the open gate onto the top stair. Down! Go! Go! Garen had Maddox's coat. Tessa had my sleeve. We went down those steps as one falling knot, boots skating on frost, and the Guildhall man flattened himself to the rail with his useless seal as we poured past him into the lamplit lane. Then the house spoke. Not a crack this time. A boom. Low. Wet. Final. 10 feet of dressed stone letting go all at once. I felt it come up through the cobbles into the soles of my feet before my ears even caught it. The crimson behind my eyes flared white and blew out. On the minute, to the breath. Exactly when my sight had promised, the way it always promises and never lies. I turned in the lane with Ezel crushed against my chest, and I made myself look. This was the part. The dust rolled out of the gateway gritty on my tongue, and I stood there and waited for the one sound I have never stopped hearing, the soft, sickening give of a small body under stone. It did not come. The terrace yard stood empty, nobody beneath it, not a single soul left under that wall. Through the thinning gray, I watched the stone land. It came down onto the timber I'd cut that morning, and the long, raking shore took it, screaming, bowing, its heel biting deep into the cobbles. The 2 center props shuddered and stood. The raker drank the rest. The whole 10 feet dropped 3 fingers' width, and then dropped no further, caught, cradled, held in my crooked, unsanctioned, God-forsaken timber and iron. The fault under the house ground out one last word and went still, and Ezel's heart was slamming against my forearm. Quick, furious, outraged, alive. She was still screaming, full-lunged, kicking, clawing at my collar, howling for her da, loud enough to wake the docks. I knew the other kind of weight. I carried one out of the column's rubble in another life, with hands that weren't these. Sarah, 6 years old, light as a folded coat, and so quiet you could hear the dust falling on her. This girl fought me with everything she had. "You're down," I told her, and my voice came out cracked and stupid. "You're cold, you're loud, you're spitting mad. Stay that way, stay loud." Maddox got both arms round the 2 of us and couldn't push a word up his throat. He just shook. Tessa pressed her face to her daughter's hair and made a sound I won't try to name. Garen sat down hard on the bottom step and laughed at the frost like a drunk. The Guildhall man stood where he'd stopped, green sash crooked, the fresh lead seal swinging dead from his fist over a wall that had killed exactly no one. He looked at the stone. He looked at the props holding it. He didn't say a word about the guild's name. Behind me, the fishwife started it. One cracked, jeering cheer. The dockmen took it up. Then the whole frost-bright street, boots stamping, fists in the air, roaring up Coppergate into the dark. I didn't cheer. I stood in the middle of all that noise with somebody else's daughter breathing hot and angry against my neck, and I let the count climb, notch, 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 back up off the floor where it had lived too long. Ezel drew one enormous breath and screamed again. I have never heard anything better. "Hold him! In the guild's name, hold him!" Stain's voice tore up the lane from the moot hall end, and he came behind it through the frost-bright dark, shoving dockmen aside, his green sash twisted, 2 gray cloaks a step behind and not catching him. The writ had cut his leash. He just didn't know it yet. I turned Ezel into Tessa's arms. "Take her. Don't let go." She took her and didn't. My hands were empty now. Good. Stain broke to the front of the crowd and stopped dead. The cheer guttered out around him. He stood there sucking air, and for one whole breath, he only stared at the gateway, at the 10 feet of dressed stone hanging in my raw timber, caught, 3 fingers low, and not a finger more. Then he found his feet again. The man always finds his feet. That apprentice broke a sanctioned seal. He flung an arm at me, at the smashed gates. Twice! You all watched it. That is the guild's wall, and he— It's the guild's wall, I said. Yes. I walked to the fallen stone. He kept talking, faster, louder, panic, the rope, the writ got by a fraud. Every smooth word he'd polished in that hall an hour ago. Nobody followed it. They were watching me crouch at the broken heap of street face and work 2 fingers into the grit. There, set flush in the dressed front, where every past wall in Coppergate wears one. A lead disc the size of a thumbnail, nailed deep, stamped with the guild's mark and the dresser's own. I dug it loose. It came away cold and gritty in my palm. I straightened. I lifted it over my head into the lamplight. Whose mark? I asked the street. Quiet rolled back up the lane to him. It's a passing seal. I turned the disc so the near rose caught the stamp. Means a guild dresser stood right here, looked at this wall, and swore on his name it would hold. I let that sit. Read me the name. The fishwife read it first. She didn't shout. She said it flat, almost soft, and somehow that was worse. Stain. It went through them low and ugly. Stain. That's Stain's mark. Stain past its sound. I looked at him then, not up, across. Behind me the wall showed me nothing. An hour ago it had burned crimson in my skull, forking and fat where the bearing died, and now it was gray, dead, spent stone with the fight gone out of it. No light left. It had said its one true thing and gone quiet. His name was still in it. He came at me, 3 strides, hand out for the disc. Give me that. Low, shaking, spit caught in his gray beard. I didn't move it. I let him get close enough to see past my shoulder, past me to the wall, to his own seal's promise, hanging dead in another man's crooked timber over a yard where nobody died. He saw it. His hand stopped in the empty air. That's where it left him. Whatever had held his spine straight through the moot hall, through the rope he'd begged Holt for, through an hour of naming me the liar, it ran out of him while he stood there. His arms sank. His jaw worked and shaped nothing. You dressed it sound, I told him. Quiet, just for him, with the whole street leaning to steal it. I read it dying. One of us was wrong on the stone tonight, Master Stain. I closed my fist on the lead. The stone settled which. The gray cloaks reached him. They took an arm each, and this time he didn't wrench free. He let them turn him. He went back down the lane the way he'd come, past the dockmen gone silent, past Maddox, who would not lift his eyes to him, past the Guildhall man with his useless fresh seal swinging dead. I stood in the cold with his mark biting into my palm. He'd cut a name into stone tonight, in front of the whole of Coppergate, deeper than any chisel of mine, his own. The lead disc went warm in my fist. Down the lane, Stain's footsteps thinned out, and then the frost swallowed even those. I waited for the next one to light. That's the thing nobody tells you about these eyes. They never rest. Every wall I pass, every lintel, the count starts its slow drop somewhere behind my teeth. This one in years, that one in a hard winter. Always one more dying thing leaning into the dark and threading red to find me. I have not had a quiet minute since the column came down on Sarah. So I looked, old habit, up the broken terrace front, the whole row of it. I waited for the crimson. Garin was still down on the bottom step, breath smoking, grinning at nothing. You see his face? He said. When the fishwife read the name. You see it? I saw it. Tessa stood with Azelle locked against her shoulder, the child gone hoarse and hiccuping now, alive and furious and small. Maddox kept a pace off them both. He had one hand flat on the cold, broken gatepost, like he was holding it up instead of the other way round. I kept hunting the red. Up the dressed stone where the wall let go, gray. Across the standing terrace, gate to gate, gray. The lintels, the sills, the crooked props I'd hammered in that morning still doing their honest work, every one of them dark and dumb and only stone. Nothing lit. I turned a full, slow circle in the middle of that lane, and not one thing burned. The count didn't drop. It just sat there. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, the floor under my skull held where it was, and nothing leaned in, and nothing called my name out of the cold. My knees tried to go. I locked them. A boy came out of the crowd. Couldn't have been 20, chisel callus on his thumb, a journeyman's plain band, no sash. One of the ones who'd stood at the rope that morning, watching me set timber. He stopped in front of me and didn't know what to do with his hands. "They'll strike his mark off the rolls," he said, low. "By morning. Old Bereckard's gone for the book already." He swallowed hard. "Half of us watched you read that frost coming. He gave up, started simpler. "Teach us. To read the dying. However you do it." Behind him, 2 more nodded, then a 4th. I looked at their hands. Young hands. Hands that would dress 100 Coppergate walls after mine were dust. "You don't need my eyes," I said. "You need to quit trusting the seal and start trusting the stone." I lifted the lead disc one last time, then dropped it into his palm. "Start with this. Learn what a lie weighs in the hand." He closed his fist on it like I'd handed him a relic. Maddox came off the gatepost then. He stood square in front of me with Izelle wailing in his ears and his whole house standing in the frost at his back, and for a man who'd had no words all night, he found a few. "It's rubble," he said, jerking his chin at the fallen face. "My terrace, half of it down, half of it up," I said. His mouth moved. Not quite a smile. "Rebuild it, the whole row." He had to stop and breathe. "On your stone, your timber. I don't lay a single brick you haven't read first. I'll pay what I've got and owe you the rest till they put me in the ground." "You'll pay in proper lime and seasoned oak," I told him. "I read every course myself." "Done." He put his hand out. I took it. His grip shook, and I'll tell you straight, so did mine. I came back through death for one girl. To dig with these hands where they wouldn't let me dig before. To claw one 6-year-old out of the dark before the stone got to her first. I stood in that lamplit lane and counted the other thing instead. Izelle on her mother's shoulder. Maddox's whole house breathing behind him. Garin laughing at the frost. The boy with the lead in his fist, and 3 more behind him who'd never pass a wall the lazy way again. A terrace of them, living, loud. Behind my eyes, first time since I cut her name myself, no red, no falling count, just the dark, holding. I let it stay quiet a while.